Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we're going to do a duet series this week. So the name of our duet series is called Love and Lies, and it's by Stacey Lynn. And the first book in the series is called All the Ugly Things. The book starts off with a scene in the courtroom where 18-year-old Lily Huntington is being sentenced for 10 years in state prison, and she's going to Iowa. Now, she lives in Illinois. Her parents are there. Her father has this stoic look on his face. Her mother's crying. She knows the judge because the judge used to come to her home since she was like 12 years old because her dad's a judge as well. The judge says to her, "Do you understand your sentence?" She's looking kind of crazy. And then she's thinking, like, why do I have to go to Iowa? And then her father says to her, "Don't contact us. We're not going to come and visit you." And so the last thought she has as she's being shackled up is that, like, pretty much this is it. I no longer have a family. All we know about what has happened is that there was an accident. She pled guilty. She has a sibling named Josh. He was killed, and her father blames her, even though she wasn't the one that was driving, and that apparently her father never liked her anyway. We fast forward 6 years. Lily is getting paroled. She was shocked by this because she didn't even know that this was coming up. So when she got the notice about it, it freaked her out because she didn't even know it was an option. And then she finds out she's going to be leaving any day now. So she did make one true friend in there. Her name was Candace. She was about 80 years old. She'd been pretty much in there, in and out pretty much her whole life, actually. She was taken in there because her stepfather used to violate her repeatedly. And so one day she stabbed him in the stomach. He kept coming at her, so she took a shotgun, took him out. So Candace just wants her to live. Once she gets out, don't look in the past. Just keep moving forward. Um, Also, her parents, they've never reached out to her. She did try and send letters to them, and the letters would come back, not able to deliver. No, first it was return to sender. Then it was not able to deliver. So they moved. So they meant what they said when they were like, don't reach out to us and we're not going to come see you or anything. They meant it. In a few days, she's going to be living in Des Moines, Iowa, because she's already, I think the name of the prison is called Mitchellsville. So she's already in Iowa because that's where she had to serve her time, and there's no one for her to go back to in Chicago. So she's going to serve out her time in the halfway house and meet her parole officer, and then she's going to be in that halfway house for about 6 months. So 10 months have now passed since she's been out. She's had a few jobs. They haven't worked out, not because she's not a hard worker, but more so because of the situations at those jobs. For instance, at an auto shop, she was almost assaulted by three of her co-workers. They used to like grab her ass and stuff, and when she told them to knock it off, they all surrounded her, and what saved her was that the boss was coming back from lunch. So now she's been working in a diner, old rundown place called Judith's, for the past few months, and she works the graveyard shift, because that helps her because she has a really hard time sleeping at night. Her mind races. And so she also attends community college during the day. So she keeps herself busy. So in walks a customer that comes in a few times a week. He started coming in about a few months ago around her, I think on her birthday. His name's David Valentine. She knows this because that's the name listed on the credit card that he uses. He is older than her. He's got a little salt and gray pepper action going on. He's always really pleasant, super nice. He knows her name is Lily, apparently, because he sees it on her badge. He asked her, what pies are being served tonight. She told him. Um, He got the apple pie, and then he said to her something about something going on with his vehicle. He said it was making some noise. It smelled funny. So she's like, okay. She's like, well, I can look at it for you. And he's, of course, shocked because he didn't know she knew anything about cars. Um, but the reason she knows is because while she was in prison, that was what she did as her job. She would work on vehicles. It gave her a chance to get away. So that's what she did. So later on, she goes out with him, figures out he needs more coolant. They actually keep coolant there at the diner for different workers because they all have pretty much older cars. And she goes and gets it, pours it in, and he hands her his card. And he talked to her about coming to work for him. And he's like, I see you're a hard worker. You work harder than anybody else. And he says, I don't have the biggest company, but we do pretty good. We have great benefits. And she's like, no, because she feels like it could be something attached to him offering her this job. I totally understand why she feels that way, considering the type of parent she had. So he hands her his business card, and there's some money attached to it. When she gets back to her apartment, she sees that it's a $300 tip. So we switch to the POV of someone named Hudson, and we find out that this is the older man, David Valentine. This is his son. So David tells Hudson, I offered her a job. And Hudson's like, why? And he's like, because she deserves better, and I made a promise. So we don't know who the promise was made to, but clearly something's up. So we do find out that David Valentine, he used to foster kids along with his wife. We don't know if that plays a part into Lily. We have no idea. So we got to figure this all out. So then David wants Hudson to go and talk to Lily. And of course, at first, he's like, nope. But eventually, he caves. And he agrees to go ahead and go. So he's seen pictures of Lily. And he finds her, of course, very attractive. But he also feels like this woman is going to cause a lot of problems. So while Lily's at school, she's eating. Someone comes up to her, a fellow classmate of hers, and asks her questions. And she's kind of being weird, this person. And so Lily blurts out, like, what do you want? Like, I'm not going to hurt you. She's just, the woman's just being really weird. So we find out her name's Angie, and she's in her accounting class. And she has a brother named Josiah, which is crazy because it's very close to her brother Josh's name. And basically, Josiah's hanging out with a bad crew, and she wants Lily to talk to him about prison life. And so Angie's like, not Angie, I'm sorry, Lily's just kind of like, he's going to have to learn for himself. And Angie's like, excuse me? She's like, he's got to do it himself, Nothing I say is going to change anything. And of course, as she walks off, she has a flashback to the night of the crash. So she'd gone to some party that was, I think, at a college where her brother Josh went. And basically he wound up hauling her away from there, but he had been drinking. And all she remembers is waking up and her father shouting at her about something being wrong with Josh's truck. And then remembering that she had, whatever, she was going to keep the promise that she had made to Josh. But we don't know what that promise is just yet. About a week passes, and Hudson finally goes to visit Lily at the diner called Judith. And so he asks for pie, and he says it in the form of, like, my dad says this place has the best pie. And she's like, your dad? And he's like, yeah. And he says, David. And she goes, Mr. Valentine? And he says, yeah. So he tries to talk to her about the possible job And same thing, she tells him the same thing. No, I'm not taking handouts. So then there's a bunch of guys there that she was serving. They were really rowdy, drunk. And even though he was mad that she was saying no to the job offer, he still didn't want like anything bad to happen to her. And so he decided he wasn't going to leave until those guys were gone. And so she went to the guys, gave them their check, was taking their plates, and one of them threw water on her. And he shot up out of his seat to run over there. But the big guy that works, I think he's like the cook, he works in the back. He comes around the corner, scared the shit out of the guys, and um, they paid their bill and they got the hell up out of there. So then she pretty much told him, again, I don't want your help. I don't need it. I don't want it from your father nor you. And made the comment, this is what happens to girls like me, you know? And he's furious at her because he knew, her background. He also knew that prior to prison, she had came from like a family of a judge and all this type of stuff. So his sister Melissa had said to help her. So we don't know how Melissa knows her. We don't know where she comes in, but that's what we do know. Melissa is no longer alive. So we got a few more answers we got to get answered. So he's pissed at her because he went back to his dad the next day to tell him, that she had said no basically again. This, of course, hurt his father. So that made him kind of hate Lily. So Lily has a counselor that she goes to see named Nancy, and her parole officer's name is Ellen. Now, the reason she has the counselor in Nancy is because when her parole officer asked her, like, what is it is you want to do with your life, girl had a full-on panic attack. Because that's just not how she viewed her life about having an actual future. So it freaked her out. So she's having lunch with her counselor, Nancy. And Nancy, of course, is all about her getting her education. And Lily is just basically trying to have enough to get by. Just live a nice life. Be like an office administrator, something simple. Nothing too difficult. Nancy wants more for her. Um, doesn't want her to just kind of settle for like a meager type of life. Not saying that being an office administrator is a meager life, but she doesn't have like goals going beyond anything. And it's because once she went to prison, the goals were gone. So if she can do anything that just kind of keeps her afloat and she's okay, then for her that's a win. And of course Nancy wants her to think beyond that. We get a flashback and we find out that while she was in the hospital, she apparently had lied to her father, and also that the reason he apparently didn't do anything to help her is because he had been really tough on crime as a judge. So he wasn't trying to show that he was easing up. And also he was about to get reelected. So clearly that's what he cared about. Um she goes home and her neighbor is a guy named Manny. He's a total creep. He tries to talk to her. She wasn't feeling him. He just seems like a really grimy character. Lily's at school and Angie comes up to her and she apologizes to her for asking her that question about talking to her brother about her experience in prison. And Lily's like, no problem. And then while they're talking, she sees Hudson, and so does Angie. Angie knows who he is. And she, of course, is like, oh my gosh, what is Hudson Valentine doing here? And he's walking towards us. So Angie, of course, wants the details like, wait a minute, how do you know him? But he gets there and he introduces himself to Angie, and then he, of course, was like, hey, can I talk to her for a little minute? She goes off. They go on a bench. They have a conversation. And he tells her the story of his parents and how they used to foster children. And they did it up until his mom died about 7 years ago. And then the dad stopped. And apparently he said something like, they know about her background, and that kind of pissed her off. Because it's not like people don't know. People know, like, because one of the professors was a dick and made a comment about the program she was in. So people know that she's in it, but it's not something that she like runs around broadcasting about. Yeah, I went to prison. Hudson then tells her, my dad, he sees something special in you. He wants to help you. Basically, you'll be a fool not to accept his help. She tells him she'll think about it. She leaves and goes home. She gets stopped by her creepy neighbor Manny again. Um, he's asking her if she's busy tonight. She's like, I gotta work. And then she runs inside, and so she decides she's gonna do a little googling about Mr. Hudson and David Valentine. So the next day, Hudson's at work, and his friend slash adopted brother Brandon um, works there as well. And he's trying to get him to sign off on this project that's going to tear down these rundown apartments, replace them with new ones, and then the people will be able to move back, have even possibly cheaper rent than what they had before. But for whatever reason, he's having a really hard time signing off on this project, and he thinks it's because it's the mention of like a diner that's close by, and diners, of course, make him think about Lily. So after they leave from there, they go play golf. When they're done playing, Brandon asks him for a favor. Brandon wants him to go on a date with one of Jenna's friends, and Jenna is Brandon's fiance. So at first he's like no, but then he'll finally agree. He agrees to do it. After that, they go to his father's house, grill some steaks. Brandon leaves after he gets drunk. He has his fiance come and pick him up. And then David and Hudson talk. And David already knew that Hudson had went and seen Lily. Because he had gone that night and talked to her, and she had told him about it. And basically was like, if y'all keep bothering me, like, then I'm not going to, like, the answer is just going to be flat out no for good. Hudson goes on a date with Brandon's fiance's friend. I don't even remember her name. She's not that important. It did not work out. He wasn't feeling her. His brain was completely on Lily. And he was just really short with the girl. The girl, of course, the woman, I'm sorry, she, of course, was upset. He apologized, but it didn't matter. She leaves. She gets an Uber. She leaves. So he then goes walking because he doesn't want to go home, and he winds up going to a church. And it's been a really long time since he's been to a church. And so he's sitting on the steps, and guess who comes walking out of the church? Good old Lily. So this is the church where she goes for her AA meetings, which are mandatory for her. It's a whole thing, part of her parole, even though the girl is not an alcoholic. She asked him what he's doing there. He was like, I literally just went for a walk and wound up here. And he asked her if they could go for a walk, and she agrees to go. They wind up going to a cupcake shop that's close by. I think it's called Creme. And he winds up buying her one of every type of cupcake that they had in the display, in the case. And she, of course, was like, oh my gosh. But it made her happy that, he was doing something like so nice for her. So they sat outside, they had some conversation, and tried a good chunk of them. And she had a great time. And then he had asked her to like take her home, and she said she declined. And he was like, okay, so she leaves and she goes home. So after she leaves, she's on her way home, she gets attacked by Manny. Dude tried to RAPED her. And he almost got it because she was screaming And she tried to knock him off of her and things like that. He had punched her in her ribs, face, everything. She was banged up pretty bad. But when she screamed, one of her neighbors, Samaya, heard and came out and was like, "Who's there? I'm going to call the police." And that's when he left. And I think she had dropped, of course, the cupcakes because she got attacked. And I think he stole them as he ran off. So he must have been following her or something. I don't know, or just waiting outside for her. I don't know. Because you know how creepy people are. They wait, they learn your schedule, and then, so they know when to attack. So that's crazy. I'm not shocked by his behavior, though, because he gave creepy vibes. He gave, I'm going to get what I want from you, whether you give it to me willingly or not. He totally gave those vibes in this story. So Samara comes out, um, tries to get her to call the police, but she won't do it. She's like, there's no point. And she gets inside of her apartment and goes and takes a shower, and she just starts crying. It just hits her of everything. Samaya brings her a basket with some ointments and things to help her. She thanks her, takes it, and she tries again to get her to call the police, but again, she's not going to do it. Um, she has a memory of when she was younger. Her brother Josh, who did drugs, and he did both drugs and alcohol. He was in and out of rehab, and his father, who's a judge, he's also an abuser. So he used to beat on the mom, and he used to beat on Josh. So one morning, Josh had been out of rehab for probably like 2 weeks, and he clearly had relapsed. He was passed out, drunk on the floor, and she had said to her dad, like, I can try and wake him up. The dad got pissed. He's like, I'm not talking to you. This has nothing to do with you. I'm talking to my son. So he just treats her like she's a piece of shit. So then she got some water, dumped it on his face to wake him up. That got him up, but the dad got mad and was like, now there's water on the floor. Like, she couldn't do anything right in her father's eyes. Even when she got accepted to Purdue, which was his alma mater, he didn't care anything. Like, she just literally didn't matter. So she calls Nancy for a session. She's also going to meet up with Ellen later, which is her probation officer. So while she's talking to Nancy can clearly see that she was attacked, right? And she's like, did you call the police? And she's like, there's no point. And she explained why. And she was just like, you still should have called the police. But she was like, but I'm going to tell Ellen what happened and we'll just deal with it that way. And she's like, I called you because I have a situation where someone's trying to help me. I don't know if it's legitimate, and I kind of want to know your take on it. And she told him about the whole thing with the Valentines offering her help. She gave their names. Nancy's, she perks up. And she's like, wait a minute. She's like, the Valor Holding, like, they own Valor Holding. Like, they're really good people. They do a lot of great things in the community, really upstanding. And so she says, okay, you should think about doing it. And she's like, okay, I'm still, looking at my decision. So she does decide she's going to call David and at least agree to a meeting. So she calls him and he's like, well, when do you want to meet? And she's like, I can be there in a few hours. He's like, okay, that's fine. So she goes to Target. She gets a little cheap dress on clearance. She still got her bruises. So I'm like, oh, shoot, because they're going to see something happen to her. So she gets to the appointment with David Valentine. Of course, he sees her face. He's like, what the hell happened? She wouldn't tell him. She's like, it's not important. She's like, that's not why I'm here anyway. So he's like, would you please reconsider, telling me what happened? She's like, nope. So they go in the conference room and he asked her basically like, what would be your dream job? What would you like to do? And it's kind of hard for her to articulate what that would be because she's scared to dream. That's so sad. And he's like, well, what are you going to school for? And she said basically she was trying to get some type of, administrator type of job. And then Hudson comes in and he sees her face. And at first he's smiling, but then when he sees what, the bruises, he's like, what the fuck happened to your face? So he runs up, grabs her, and he's like, "Tell me who did this." And she's like, "Put me down." And no. So then the dad was kind of like talking him down off the rage as she went, because she left and she went to the bathroom to like get herself cleaned up. And then when she came back, they all talked. And from what she was saying, they kind of figured she would be pretty good at like maybe in the design department, like an entry level intern type of position. And they had some other options for her as well, and they gave her all that information. And they were like, look it over and decide. So later that night, Hudson arrives at the her job, at the diner. And she, of course, is like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just going to be here to make sure you be okay." So he stayed that whole night, didn't leave. Next morning, she wakes up. She is in pain. So she goes to take a shower, and she sees that there's a notice that's been placed under her door. It's a packet, and it says that her lease is being terminated because the building is getting torn down. She doesn't read the rest of it. She just sees that it's a Valor Corporation. She knows it's the Valentines, and she is pissed. So she goes down to their office and screams at them, and is like, "What the fuck?" Like. And they were looking at her like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Don't play dumb with me." So then she threw the packet at them, and they were like, "Oh my God, we didn't know you lived there." And she, of course, was thinking they had to have known. You know, they looked up everything else. So I don't think that was a true statement. So she storms out. But before she left, she told him, "You stay away from me, both of you." So she gets back to her place. Sure enough, boom, boom, boom. It's good old Mr. Hudson knocking on her door. She looks out the peephole, and she sees that he's actually at the door across from her, because that's where Manny lives, his apartment. Can you imagine? You get attacked by a person they live right across from you. Oh my gosh. So awful. Um, and so all she knows is she sees like him screaming at him, and then he comes back to her door. So finally she opens the door, and he was like, "I didn't know." And she finally decides to let him on in. And then he gives her the packet and tells her, "We've been working on this deal for over a year. Notices were supposed to be sent out to the owners of the building 6 months ago." She's like, "Well, I just moved in 5 months ago." And he says, "Well, that's not my fault. We sent the notice. We sent notice after notice, for the owners to let you all know." And then he showed her the list of apartments that she could move into, and she'd be paying the same amount of rent, but they were nicer apartments. And then once these were rebuilt, that she was going to be able to move back in, pay the same amount, if not cheaper. So they apparently were using like reusable, recyclable items, that was going to help, with the cost with these buildings. And then she, of course, has egg on her face because she felt stupid, and she should have. Because if you get a packet like that, why would you just read a fucking sentence, right? That's kind of stupid. It's a fucking packet, which means there's more shit in there for you to look at. So yeah, that was kind of dumb on her part, just saying. So then of course she had to apologize because she was dead as wrong. And he showed her some of the apartments, and he showed her a newer one, which winds up being where he lives. And a tear dropped from her eye when she looked at it, because it made her think of the life that she thought she would have once she graduated from Purdue and started like a new career, because she did want to be a lawyer, but that was more so because her dad was a judge trying to appease her father. Wasn't really something she truly wanted to do. And he says, "I can take you now to go look at it." And she's like, "Okay." She's like, "But let me just stop somewhere real quick before we leave." And then before they left, he also told her, he's like, "That was the guy that um beat you up, isn't it?" And she kind of put her head down. He's like, "I know it's the guy," because the guy had called her like a cunt and stuff. So he knew it was the dude. So then we switch to Hudson's POV, and we find out a couple of things. His ass did know where she lived. um, he knew of course he's lying to her about it, and he did feel bad about that. Um, we also find out that there are a couple of units still available in this building. I think I'm sure that his father or they own that building, if I'm not mistaken. And then Lily goes, "Can we stop somewhere before we leave?" And he says, "Okay, cool, no problem." So they stop by Samaya's apartment, and she gives Samaya the information about these new apartments. She's like, "I don't know if you already have a place, but if you don't, like, this would be really nice for you and the girls," because Samaya has twin girls. And so Amaya was like, "Thank you, I'll think about it." And Lily was like, "That's the least I can do for you. You did help me the other night." And Samaya was like, any decent person would have done that for you. And Lily was like, "That's not true." And that was sad. But listen, when your own parents treat you like garbage, it's kind of hard for you to look at the world and think that, they're really good people that'll help you. That's hard. So they leave and they go to the loft, and immediately she likes it. She's like, "Yep, I'll take it." you know, she's going to stop saying no to everything. She's going to start trying to make, lemonade out of lemons. And I'm like, good. That's very good. She moves in a couple days later. Hudson helps her move. We also find out that Samaya decided to move into the building as well, which made me really happy because, her and her girls, they deserved a nice place to live as well. She has a meeting with her probation officer, Ellen. She was about to get in trouble because she hadn't notified her that she had moved. So then when she showed up and she looked, of course she's looking around. She's like, "How did you get this?" So then she talks about, the Valentines and them wanting to help her. And Ellen's skeptical and just kind of told her, "Listen, even though they do great in the community, that doesn't mean they're exempt from doing possible bad stuff too. So in other words, keep your eyes open." And I wonder if she knows something too. I wonder. So then she goes to class the next day. Angie sits next to her, and it's an accounting class. She has this boring professor, which makes it even harder for her to concentrate when it's already difficult for her. She winds up asking Angie for help, which I thought was really great because she has a hard time asking for help. And they had a test on Thursday, so that was really good. That was smart of her, and that's a good first step. So it was also nice for her to be able to invite someone over to her place because now she has this nice place. And that was just exciting just to read it. It makes you really happy for the character. So then Angie comes over. They have a nice time. Angie tells her um, a lot about herself. And Angie was starting to ask her questions, but that's when she starts to shut down. Because she's like, "I'm not talking about that. So then the girl wants to know why she was in jail and stuff like that. And she's not going to talk about that with her right now. I mean, you got to kind of earn a little bit more trust. I mean, it takes some trust for somebody to, let you come to their home, right? But she needs a little bit more before she starts like telling you everything. We do find out a little bit about Angie. She has two younger siblings and then her older brother Josiah, and her mother remarried after their father, Josiah and Angie's father, like left when they were like a couple of years old. And the mother's now married to a trucker, but he's barely there, which is why a lot of times she's got to help take care of the younger siblings. So she winds up getting a B on her test, which is great. She goes to work. There's a rowdy bunch of people there. It's someone's 21st birthday. They've already been drinking. Hudson comes in. He stayed away for a little bit and tells her, I was just trying to give you a chance to settle in. But the truth was, he had kind of felt stalkerish. So he was just kind of like, let me give her a little space. And she did miss him. So every time the rowdy bunch that was drinking called her over, Hudson would look kind of nervous, like he was always kind of concerned. But she was like, "I've dealt with rowdy, drunk people before. That's not an issue." But she always makes sure that one of them is sober, like they have a designated driver. And we know where that comes from what happened with her. And so then her and Hudson have a little conversation, and she tells him about passing the test, and he's like, "Okay, great. Then we get to go out to celebrate." And she's like a date? And she starts freaking out. But she does agree to go. A couple days later, she goes to the office. She sets up a meeting to meet with David to agree to a position. She gets there and notices, hold on, they notice that she's not in any hand me downs. Like, she has some nice clothes on. So then Hudson tells her, you look nice. And she says, thank you. And she's like, I decided on a position. It's an assistant, but it's like a lower level. And it was one of the lower paying jobs as well of the options they had given her. And she was like, don't try and stop me. I know what experience I have and what this job requires. And I don't want to take more than what I should. Um, and that she wasn't budging off of that. So this job is to be the assistant to the assistant of Brandon. So Hudson goes to get Brandon to do the interview, and Brandon didn't know nothing about this. So he's freaking out a little bit. He's a little pissed. And he's like, y'all didn't think to like loop me in on what's going on. He has anger issues as well. And they were just kind of like, this is dad. Hudson was like, this is dad stuff. And listen, I couldn't say anything until he said it was okay. So then Brandon goes in to do the interview. So she kind of can tell that there's tension with all three of them in there. So then she asks for the interview to just be her and Brandon alone. Hudson at first didn't want to do it. He eventually caves. David agrees. They go outside. So then her and Brandon have a little conversation, and he kind of just wants to know, um, just kind of, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Those type of things. Just tell me about yourself. So she couldn't figure out what to wear to the date, I say it in quotation marks, with Hudson. And so she texts Angie, and then she forgot that Angie um, was on a date. And Angie was like, no, that's fine. So she told her what to wear. And Hudson's going to get there in like 15 minutes. She's super nervous. And so when he arrives, he, of course, tells her she looks wonderful, even though she was doing like the cash look. And he walks her out. They go around the building into another elevator to go up to the penthouse. And she was like, where are we going? He's like, well, I figured you would be tense around other people. And so I figured, I'd just have a dinner set up in my place. And she was actually really thankful for that because she didn't want to be around a bunch of folks. So it worked out. And she was about to, of course, do the whole I don't deserve this. And he was just kind of telling her, stop saying that. You do deserve it. And I want to be able to show you that you do deserve it. That type of treatment. They have dinner. It does spark some memories for her because he had done like lobster and I want to say lobster and steak. And that's what she used to get when she would go along for birthday celebrations at a ritzy restaurant in Chicago with her family. It was like one of the things she did enjoy with her family. So they had some good conversation. He asked her a little bit about prison. She told him a little bit. We found out Brandon's mother is actually in Mitchellsville prison where she was apparently. Her name's Helen. She does remember her. He doesn't go into full detail about Brandon's past because that's Brandon's past to tell, not his. He talks about the adoption and stuff like that. And they get ready to go because she has to go to the diner that night to work. And he's like, are you going to give your 2-week notice tonight? She says yes. So then he tells her, okay, I'll walk you down. He walks her down. They get to the door and he's honest with her. And he says, listen, I know you said just friends, but if you ever want to change that and want to explore more, he's like, I want that as well. So the girl is baffled. All she can say is his name. She's like, Hudson. And he just puts his fingers over her lips and he kisses her on the cheek. And it was beyond glorious for her. And he wouldn't go up the elevator until she went back inside her apartment. And she was just floored because it was such a revelation for her because she just hadn't imagined that someone like him would ever look at her that way. So we get a flashback of the accident. So what happened was a dude that tried to grab her while she was at that party, tried to violate her, and a couple came out, and when they came out the door, hit the guy Billy, and so she was able to get away from him. So she ran off and she texted Josh, and she of course told him who did it, and he beat Billy to a pulp. So then she had to like beg him to stop beating the guy up. And then before they left, he was like, I got to get a beer to calm my nerves. And he's like, I don't want dad to know, you know, I need to be calmer when I see dad. So she's like, we could just get an Uber. And he's like, no, I got it. It's only 2 miles. So, of course, in those 2 miles, he falls asleep. He goes unconscious. She can't wake him up. Crashes, wakes up in the hospital. The dad's telling her, you got to take the fall for this because it's going to ruin Josh's future. And if you don't take the fall for it, we're going to kick you out, basically, of the family, leave you with nothing. And so she said, okay, I'll say it was me. Josh died 2 days later. She got charged with the felony charges. And we find out Josh had, I guess, well, not find out because we knew this from earlier. Josh had issues with drugs and alcohol for years, in and out of rehab, and it never helped because once he got out of rehab, he had no help. So it just kept being the same pattern. He would never get better, and his father was kept pushing the bullshit under the rug. So it's Sunday. He goes down to see Lily, invite her to family dinner at his dad's house. She had just gotten up. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we find out that when she gave her notice on Friday night, Judith was like, well, you can work until Saturday night, and then you're done. So they wouldn't even let her work out the full 2 weeks. And he was going to have Brandon just have her start early. And she said, don't worry about it. Let me ask Brandon, let me handle it. She did freak out about what she was going to wear to the Sunday dinner. And they have a nice little conversation in the car. She gets to the dinner. Jenna, who's Brandon's fiance, she's a lawyer, and she's exactly as Hudson had described her. She's a full force. So first thing she says is, oh my gosh, another woman. I love it. I need your help. I need you to tell him he needs to put more garlic on the garlic bread. So they got along great. They sit down, and while they're eating, we find out Brandon and Jen, they're getting married in about 6 weeks. And they're going to Fiji for their honeymoon. Hudson blurts out about, Brandon had asked Lily, did you put in your notice with, at the diner? And she said yes. And then Hudson blurts out, yeah. And they told her not to come back. And she was like, just looked at him like, I told you I was going to handle this. Brandon was like, that's no problem. You just start Wednesday. You can start on Wednesday, And she's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, just start Wednesday. So then David asked her, Thanksgiving's coming up, if you don't have any plans, you know, would you consider coming? And she was like, I'll think about it. She didn't just want to jump on the offer. They leave from the dinner. She's kind of quiet. And then she has a memory and she starts thinking about the woman that used to come, that was close to her age, that used to they used to have church in the jail. And different churches would come, but this woman came for about a year. And then she stopped coming. She never heard what happened to the woman. But she did remember that the woman had said to her, how did she say it? She's like, I wish you had my father. And so while she's telling Hudson the story, he gets really quiet. Something's going on, but she's thinking it's just he's overwhelmed by the story. But we know now this is because this has got to be Melissa, his sister. So when they get out of the car, he's about to leave. She doesn't want him to. She grabs him, kisses him. Of course, it was magnificent. But he was just like, I want to take it slow with you. I don't want to rush you. Next day, she has a conversation with Ellen, her probation officer, told her everything that happened when she quit Judas and about the new job. And Ellen's like, we haven't had dinner in a while. Because she used to always have dinner with Ellen Like, that was her interaction when she would meet up with Ellen, her probation officer. So she hasn't been doing that. So she's like, give me a couple weeks, to, work in the new job, and then I'll have something to actually talk to you about. So it's her first day. She winds up walking to work with Hudson. He figured she want to walk because, again, she's not really comfortable in vehicles. It's less than 10 minutes anyway from where they live. She said to him about him calling her, and he's like, well, I can't do that because I don't have your number. He was like, I could have went and looked it up. He was like, but I was waiting for you to give it to me. So she gives it to him, and then he texts his number back, and he sent her a text, letting her know, I hope you have a great day, and how beautiful she was. The girl is on cloud nine. It got super cold outside, so he went and got his truck, came back, so when they got off work, he could take her home via truck. And he also had messaged Brandon like a gazillion times that day, asking how everything was going with her. And Brandon's like, dude, chill out. She's cool. Everything's fine. So after work, she gets in the truck. They go home. She has a meeting at the church for the AA. He's going to take her. But before, they're going to have a little date before she goes to the meeting. So it was a place where she had like some spicy noodles, and it made her think about the type of food she would get when she was with her friend Kendra back in high school, having sushi. Made her sad for a moment. He took her to the meeting, waited for her outside. After the meeting, they wound up going back to her place. She tells the story of what happened that fateful night. He, of course, told her, it's not your fault. You called the person that you trusted the most in the world. Like, how are you wrong for that? But in her brain, she feels like, I could have stayed the night with someone. I could have done anything except for call him. But I think that the truth of the matter is his demise was going to happen regardless, because he was an addict. You know what I'm saying? Like, he had already crashed the vehicle a few times before. So I figured this way, he died. That's bad. Yeah, but what if it would have kept happening and he killed someone else? You know what I'm saying? Like, he was kind of headed down that path regardless. But it's hard for her to see that, because in her brain, if I hadn't called him, he would still be here. But I think, yeah, but he just would have probably died another way. It could have been an overdose. It could have been anything, another way he would have died, because he was tortured, you know? So he tells about, the her dad, and how, like, he never hit her, but he would beat on Josh and the mother. So the mother was an alcoholic too. Like, it was just an awful, crazy situation. And so afterwards, she cried like a baby, and he stayed there with her until she fell asleep. And then he put her in her bed, but he stayed there with her, snuggled up with her the whole night. Um, she woke up in the morning, took a shower, and she was just shocked that he was still there after all the ugliness that she had told him. So a week has passed, and Hudson in his office, his dad comes to see him, and he kind of snaps at his dad. He's like, you need to tell her. And David's like, it's not the right time. And he screamed out, I'm falling in love with her. The truth was, he's already in love with that girl. When he saw her picture, like, he was already pretty much a goner. So, so he's like, just give me until the end of the holidays, and then I'll tell her. And he's like, okay, begrudgingly, he's like, okay. So during this time, him and Lily, they keep having these hot makeout sessions. Lily's ready for it to go further, but he stops it every time because of the secret. That night, she had to study, and every night, this is what happens. They make out. She has to study. They fall asleep together. That's the pattern that's being done. So she gets done studying, and he had texted her, and he was just kind of like, you want to come upstairs, come up to my place? And they still haven't fucked. He just holds her every night. So then, of course, she gets up there. They wind up kissing, and They didn't fuck, but what he did was he fingered her and made her come. And then he, of course, said to her, just thank you for trusting me to do that for you. So then it's the night before Thanksgiving. He said he was going over to his dad's the night before, but he wound up staying home and drinking, staring at a picture of his sister Melissa, crying because Melissa died 2 days before Thanksgiving. So this is always a really hard time of year for him and his dad. So he gets drunk, but Lily thinks he's at his dad's. So when she thinks he's probably back, she goes up to his penthouse, knocks on the door. He looks disheveled and all. She sees something's wrong, but she wants him. And so then they start kissing it. And before you know it, he's trying to stop it. And then he says before he dives in, he's like, please forgive me. And then they have this nice, beautiful lovemaking session. And then the next morning, she wakes up to go make coffee. She sees the bottle of alcohol, and she knew he was drunk. She could tell. She tasted it on him that night before. But hell, the girl wanted what she wanted. So then she sees a frame, and she sees the picture, and she's looking at it, and she realizes it's the woman that used to come to the jail. And so now she's freaking out. So then he comes out of the room, and he's like, Lily, and she's like, who is she? Tell me who she is. And so then everything around her feels like it's shattering, because it's like kind of like what mind fuck am I in, right? And so she screams it again. She yells at him, who is she to you? And which is a great Brandy song, by the way. And that's what that made me think about when I read that. And then that's how it ends. And so the finale of the duet series is called All the Beautiful Things. What did you guys think of this? I really like this. This was like my first time. I don't remember reading something where the main character was like just getting out of jail, and I don't know, it's just like, this is real, So I really liked it. It's a cute story. I'm trying to figure out what is so bad. I mean, I get the whole aspect of you all, you know, this is your, she doesn't know it's his sister yet. But it's like, even when she finds out that's his sister, what makes it so bad? This person saw something special in you, and she made her dad, this was the promise, she made her dad, I guess, help her. I guess we'll find out more in book 2. I haven't read that one yet. So I guess we'll find out what is so tragic about this. I don't see it as that horrible. She's not a bad person. They're helping you. I don't know. Maybe it makes her feel like they didn't see something special. Maybe that's how it starts to feel to her. I don't know. But I like this read. I'm really excited to finish it up in the final book, to read everything, to find out all the secrets that we couldn't find out in book 1. Let me know what you guys think. Drop down in that comment section and let me know. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook journal, I do have those on sale, and that link will be available down below in the description section. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, I truly do thank you all for your support, and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.